She snapped her fingers at him like he was a stray dog blocking her path. "This table, now, move." Elena Blackwood, worth $14 billion, had never heard the word no in her adult life. Until tonight. Daniel Carter didn't flinch, didn't stand, didn't apologize. He looked her dead in the eyes and said 5 words that made every server in Le Chateau stop breathing. "Ma'am, I was here first." What happened next would destroy his career, threaten his daughter's future, and force 2 people from opposite worlds to confront everything they believed about trust, dignity, and love. But neither of them knew that yet. Comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. The phone call came at 4:47 p.m. on a Thursday. Daniel Carter was elbow deep in a broken furnace when his cell buzzed against his hip. He ignored it. Mrs. Patterson in 4B had been without heat for 6 hours, and her arthritis was already flaring up from the cold. The phone buzzed again. He wiped the grease from his hands and checked the screen. Dave Morrison, his old buddy from the insurance company. "Dave, I'm in the middle of something." "Drop it. I got you an interview." Daniel wedged the phone between his ear and shoulder, still working the stubborn valve. "An interview for what?" "Facilities director position, new development project downtown. The guy I told you about, remember, connected. Serious money." "Dave, I appreciate it, but..." 60% raise, Dan, full benefits. Dental coverage that actually covers something." Daniel's hands stopped moving. Sophie needed braces. The orthodontist had quoted him $4,000 after insurance, and his insurance covered exactly nothing useful. He'd been picking up extra shifts, selling his fishing gear on Facebook Marketplace, doing everything short of selling blood to scrape together the down payment. "When?" "Tonight. 7 o'clock. Place called Le Chateau on Madison." "Tonight, Dave, I can't just..." "You can and you will. This is the opportunity, brother, the one we've been waiting for. You show up, you shake hands, you let them see what you can do. That's all I'm asking." Daniel stared at his grease-stained fingers. His best shirt was hanging in the closet, slightly wrinkled but clean. He could shower at the building, borrow some decent shoes from his locker. "What's the catch?" "No catch. Just be yourself. Tell them what you told me about the hospital situation last year, how you identified that electrical failure before it fried the operating rooms." "That was just doing my job." "That was saving lives, Dan. That was being the best damn facilities guy in this city, without anyone noticing, because guys like us don't get noticed. Until now." Daniel finished the repair in silence, turning Dave's words over in his mind. After hanging up, he climbed the 4 flights to Mrs. Patterson's apartment to check that the heat was flowing properly. She opened the door wrapped in 3 sweaters, her face lighting up when she felt the warm air pushing through the vents. "Oh, Daniel, you're a miracle worker." "Just doing my job, Mrs. P." "Nonsense. You care. That's different." She pressed a wrinkled $20 bill into his palm. "For Sophie. Buy her something sweet." "Mrs. Patterson, I can't." "You can, and you will." She closed his fingers around the money. "Pride is expensive, young man. Don't let it cost you more than you can afford." Sophie was waiting at the kitchen table when Daniel got home, her homework spread out in organized piles that reminded him so much of Rachel it made his chest tight. "Dad, you're late." "I know, baby. Emergency at work." He kissed the top of her head, inhaling the strawberry shampoo she insisted on using, even though the generic brand was half the price. "How was school?" "Good. Mrs. Wilson said my bridge design is the best she's seen in 20 years of teaching." Daniel stopped halfway to the bathroom. "She said that she wants to enter it in the citywide engineering competition. The finals are at the Museum of Science and Industry." Sophie's voice carried that particular mixture of pride and nervousness that 9-year-olds master when they're afraid to hope too hard. "The winner gets a scholarship to summer engineering camp at Northwestern." "Soph, that's incredible." "There's an entry fee, $75, plus materials for the final model." The number landed like a punch. $75 he didn't have, materials he couldn't afford. Another thing Sophie deserved that he couldn't provide. "We'll figure it out." He said the same words he'd been saying for 4 years. "You always say that." "Because it's always true." He knelt beside her chair, taking her small hands in his rough ones. "Your brain is getting into that competition if I have to sell my tools to make it happen." Sophie studied his face with those eyes, Rachel's eyes brown and warm, and too perceptive for her age. "You have an interview tonight, don't you? How did you? You only shower twice in one day when something important is happening. And you ironed your blue shirt last night. I saw it hanging in your closet." Daniel laughed despite himself. "You're too smart for your own good, you know that. Mom used to say the same thing." The mention of Rachel hung between them, not painful anymore, but present like a scar that had healed but never quite faded. "Yeah," Daniel said softly. "She did." Le Chateau occupied the ground floor of a building Daniel had driven past 100 times without really seeing. The kind of place with no prices on the menu, because if you had to ask, you couldn't afford it. He adjusted his collar for the 3rd time before pushing through the heavy brass doors. Inside, everything gleamed. Crystal, silver, marble. The kind of aggressive elegance that existed specifically to make people like him feel small. A man in a suit that cost more than Daniel's monthly rent appeared at his elbow. "Good evening, sir. Do you have a reservation?" "I'm meeting someone. David Morrison arranged it. I'm a bit early." The man's eyes performed a quick assessment: the slightly frayed collar, the department store shoes, the watch that was practical rather than prestigious. His smile remained professional, but something behind it shifted. "Of course, sir. Your party hasn't arrived yet. I can seat you while you wait. Somewhere quiet if possible. Corner table." "Certainly. Table 14 should suit your needs." Daniel followed him through the restaurant, acutely aware of how his footsteps sounded against the marble, how the other diners glanced up briefly before dismissing him. He belonged here about as much as a wrench belonged in a jewelry box. The corner table was perfect, quiet, private, good sightlines to the entrance so he could spot his contact when he arrived. "May I bring you something while you wait? Perhaps a cocktail or an appetizer?" Daniel thought of the carefully counted bills in his wallet. "Just water, thanks." "Very good, sir." Alone, Daniel checked his watch. 10 minutes early. He smoothed his tie, rehearsed his talking points, tried to remember everything Dave had told him about making a good impression. His phone buzzed. A text from Sophie. "Good luck, Dad. You've got this. Remember, bridges distribute tension through multiple points instead of centralizing it. That's what makes them strong." He smiled at the screen. His daughter reducing life to engineering principles. Just like her mother. The Bentley pulled up to the curb at exactly 6:58 p.m. Elena Blackwood didn't wait for the valet to open her door. She emerged like a force of nature, phone already pressed to her ear heels, striking the pavement with the precision of a metronome. "I don't care what the board thinks. The Stellaris acquisition closes next quarter or heads will roll. Mine won't be among them." She handed her keys to the approaching valet without looking at him. The young man fumbled, dropped them, scrambled to retrieve them from the pavement. Elena's gaze flicked toward him. Cold. Assessing. "That's a $50,000 vehicle. Perhaps handling it requires more competence than you currently possess." The valet's face went crimson. "I'm so sorry, Miss Blackwood. It won't happen again." "See that it doesn't." She ended her call and strode toward the entrance, where the restaurant manager was already rushing forward with the expression of a man greeting his own execution. "Miss Blackwood, welcome back to Le Chateau. Your table is ready, of course." "Of course it is." Elena surrendered her coat without acknowledging the hostess, who received it. "I have a dinner meeting with Jonathan Peters from Pioneer Investments. 8 o'clock. I assume everything is in order." "Absolutely. However," the manager's voice cracked slightly, There was a minor issue with your usual table. A water pipe situation earlier today. Maintenance assured us it's repaired, but we thought perhaps... You thought what? We could offer you an alternative location with comparable privacy. Elena's expression didn't change, but something in the air around her seemed to drop 10 degrees. I don't pay premium prices for substandard accommodations. Where is my usual table? Table 12, ma'am. But as I mentioned, show me. Look, Daniel saw her before she saw him. The woman cut through the restaurant like a shark through still water. The manager trailing behind her in obvious distress. Everything about her screamed money and power. The tailored suit, the perfect posture, the absolute confidence that the world would rearrange itself to accommodate her needs. She stopped at a table near the center of the room, examined it with visible disgust, then turned her attention elsewhere. Her eyes landed on Daniel's corner table. That one, she said. Better lighting, better privacy, better position. Ma'am, that table is currently occupied. Then unoccupy it. Daniel watched her approach with growing awareness that whatever was about to happen, it wasn't going to be pleasant. The manager's expression had shifted from distressed to desperate, his hands making small placating gestures that Elena ignored entirely. She stopped directly beside his table. Up close, she was striking. Sharp features, intelligent eyes, the kind of beauty that came from expensive maintenance and absolute self-assurance. Mid-40s maybe, the sort of woman who had probably been turning heads since high school and had long since stopped noticing. This table is more suitable for my meeting, she stated. Not a request, a declaration of fact. The management will happily relocate you to accommodate my reservation. Daniel looked at her. Then he looked at the manager, whose expression suggested he was seriously considering a career change. Then he looked back at the woman, who clearly expected him to scramble to his feet, apologize profusely, and disappear to whatever lesser location the restaurant deemed appropriate for people of his economic status. Ma'am, Daniel said calmly, I'm waiting for someone important. I was seated here because I specifically requested a quiet corner. Her eyebrow arched. Perhaps you didn't hear me. I'm Elena Blackwood. This table... I heard you. Daniel gestured to the empty chair across from him. But I was here first. You're welcome to share if you'd like. The restaurant went silent. Not quiet. Silent. The kind of silence that happens when everyone in a room simultaneously realizes they're witnessing something unprecedented. Elena Blackwood stared at him as if he'd grown a second head. Excuse me. I said you're welcome to share the table. It's big enough for both of us. Do you have any idea who I am? You just told me, Elena Blackwood. Daniel picked up his water glass, took a calm sip. I'm Daniel Carter. Nice to meet you. The manager looked like he might actually faint. Miss Blackwood, he stammered. Perhaps I could prepare the private dining room upstairs. It would offer even more... Be quiet. Elena's voice cut through his suggestion like a blade. She was still staring at Daniel, her expression cycling through emotions too quickly to catalog. Shock, outrage, confusion, and something else. Something that looked almost like curiosity. You're refusing to move. I'm suggesting we share. There's a difference. No one has ever... She stopped herself, jaw tightening. Daniel set down his water glass. Look, Miss Blackwood, I'm sure your meeting is important. I'm sure you're used to getting whatever table you want in whatever restaurant you want. But I've been sitting here for 15 minutes waiting for an interview that could change my daughter's life. So with all due respect, I'm not moving. Something shifted in Elena's expression. Your daughter. Sophie, she's 9, smart as they come. Daniel's voice carried a warmth that hadn't been there before. She needs braces we can't afford. This interview might fix that. Elena stood perfectly still for a long moment, the entire restaurant holding its breath around her. Then, without warning, she pulled out the chair across from Daniel and sat down. Fine. She said the word clipped, but no longer hostile. We'll share. The collective exhale from the staff was almost audible. The manager scrambled to adjust, signaling frantically to servers who materialized with additional place settings menus, a wine list thick as a dictionary. "Bring the 82 Bordeaux," Elena ordered without looking at the list. "2 glasses." "Ma'am, I should mention, I didn't ask for your input." The server vanished. Daniel watched her settle into the chair with the precision of someone who planned every movement. Phone placed face up on the table. Napkin arranged precisely. Posture perfect. "So," she said, her tone carrying the cool efficiency of a job interview, "Daniel Carter, you fix things." "I supervise maintenance operations for Westridge Properties. Leaky faucets, broken elevators, that sort of thing." The condescension was unmistakable. "Last month," Daniel replied evenly, "I identified a critical failure in the primary electrical system at Mercy Hospital before it could affect their operating rooms. 3 surgeries were in progress at the time." Elena's expression flickered. "Is that so?" "I've designed backup systems that have prevented catastrophic failures during power outages, implemented preventive maintenance protocols that have saved companies millions, trained teams that keep buildings functioning safely when most people don't even think about what's happening behind their walls." He paused. "But yes, I also fix leaky faucets." Something that might have been respect crossed Elena's features before she suppressed it. "You're defensive about your profession." "Not defensive. Accurate. There's dignity in work that keeps things running, even when it's invisible to most people." The wine arrived. Elena tasted it, nodded approval, waited while both glasses were filled. "Tell me something," she said. "What brings a maintenance supervisor to a restaurant where the entrees cost more than your hourly wage?" "A business meeting, same as you." "Ambitious." "Practical. The job pays 30% more than my current position, better benefits, better hours." Daniel met her gaze directly. "Better life for Sophie." Elena studied him over the rim of her wine glass. "You make significant decisions based on your daughter's needs." "I make most decisions based on what's best for her." "And your own ambitions." "My ambitions are her ambitions, giving her opportunities I never had, watching her become something extraordinary." Daniel's voice softened. "She wants to be an engineer, spends hours building increasingly complicated structures. Her teacher says she's the most innovative student she's seen in 2 decades. Engineering." Elena's tone carried genuine interest for the first time. "Applied sciences." "Structural mostly. She's obsessed with bridges, how they work, how they fail, how to make them stronger." Daniel smiled. "Her latest design distributes tension through multiple points instead of centralizing it. She figured it out herself." Impressive for a 9-year-old. She's not a typical 9-year-old. 20 minutes passed, then 30. Neither of their expected dinner companions had appeared. Daniel checked his phone again. 3 texts to Dave, all unanswered. A sick feeling began to form in his stomach. "Your contact isn't coming," Elena observed. It wasn't a question. "Looks that way." "Neither is mine, apparently." She held up her phone, showing a text message. "Jonathan Peters, unexpected conflict at his office. We'll have to reschedule for next week." Daniel didn't respond. His mind was already calculating. The evening wasted. The opportunity lost. Sophie's braces pushed further into the impossible future. "You're disappointed." "I'm frustrated." He set down his phone. "But I've learned not to count on things I can't control." "A practical philosophy." "A necessary one." Daniel looked at her directly. "You learn quickly when you're raising a kid alone. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst, adapt to whatever actually happens." Elena's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. Alone. The mother. Cancer. 4 years ago. The single word landed between them like a stone in still water. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. Jennifer wouldn't want pity. She'd want me to focus on Sophie. Keep moving forward, not let bitterness steal the joy from our lives." Daniel's voice remained steady, but something deeper moved beneath it. Her last words to me. A promise she made me keep. Elena was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice had lost its sharp edge. That must be challenging, raising a child alone while working a demanding job. It is. But Sophie makes it worth it. Daniel's face softened in a way that transformed his features entirely. She's the best thing I've ever done, the only thing that really matters. The server approached cautiously. Would you care to order, or shall I bring more time? Elena glanced at Daniel. Since we're both stranded by unreliable dinner companions, perhaps we should eat. My treat. That's not necessary. I'm aware it's not necessary. I'm stating a preference. She opened her menu. Consider it compensation for the table-sharing inconvenience. Daniel hesitated. Pride pulled at him. The numbers in his bank account pulled harder. I'll leave the tip. Elena's eyebrow arched. The maintenance supervisor wants to tip on the billionaire's dinner. My principles don't change based on who's at the table. Something that might have been amusement crossed her features. Fair enough. She ordered the seared scallops dressing on the side. Daniel chose the roast chicken, the most reasonably priced entree that would still allow him to leave a proper tip. Tell me about your daughter's bridge design, Elena said after the server departed. The tension distribution system. Daniel blinked, surprised by the genuine interest in her voice. It's based on something she observed in my work. When I reinforce shelving units, I don't just add support in the center. I distribute the load across multiple connection points. He traced a pattern on the tablecloth with his finger. Sophie applied the same principle to her bridge model. Instead of one central support column, she created a web of smaller supports that share the stress. Redundancy through distribution. Exactly. If one point fails, the others compensate. Elena nodded slowly. It's sound engineering. Most adults don't grasp that concept intuitively. Sophie's not like most anyone. Clearly not. Elena paused, seeming to consider something. The Blackwood Foundation runs a STEM program for elementary-age children with demonstrated aptitude. The application deadline for next year's cohort is next month. Daniel looked up sharply. I wasn't aware of that program. Few people are. We prefer to identify candidates through educator recommendations rather than open calls, which filters out kids whose teachers don't have time for extra paperwork. Daniel's voice carried no accusation, just observation. Same reason Sophie's school has one microscope for 30 students, while private academies have fully equipped labs. Elena's expression flickered. Most people in her position would have defended the status quo. Instead, she seemed to genuinely consider his point. That's a valid criticism. Perhaps our approach warrants reconsideration. The response surprised him. Most people in your position would tell me I don't understand how things work. Most people in my position have never had anyone point out the blind spots in their systems. Elena's voice carried something new, respect perhaps, or at least recognition. I didn't build a technology empire by clinging to flawed approaches when better alternatives were identified. Their food arrived momentarily, interrupting the conversation. Daniel watched Elena cut her scallops with surgical precision, every movement controlled and deliberate. A woman who had learned to manage everything in her life, including how she ate. You mentioned you started your company at a kitchen table, he said. Family support through that process. Elena's knife paused mid-cut. No, quite the opposite. How so? She set down her utensils, something shifting behind her carefully composed expression. My fiancé emptied our joint accounts the same week my brother sold my initial algorithm to a competitor. Apparently my obsession with success made me difficult to live with. The words came out flat, clinical, like she was reading from someone else's biography. That's a hell of a betrayal, Daniel said simply. It was educational. Elena picked up her knife again. I learned early that affection is a mask for opportunism. Family, friends, romantic partners, they all turn when money is involved. They all take. That's one interpretation of what happened to you. Her eyes snapped to his. Excuse me. I said that's one interpretation. Daniel's voice remained calm. Another interpretation is that you encountered two terrible people who violated your trust in the worst possible way. That doesn't mean everyone operates the same way. My experience since then has confirmed the pattern repeatedly. Or your expectations have created a self-fulfilling prophecy. Daniel held her gaze. When you assume everyone wants to use you, you only notice evidence that supports that belief. The people who might have proven otherwise never get close enough to try. Elena's jaw tightened. You presume to psychoanalyze me based on an hour's conversation? Not psychoanalysis, just observation. Daniel set down his fork. My work requires me to identify problems before they become catastrophic. Sometimes that means noticing patterns others miss. And what pattern do you see in me? Someone who built walls high enough to keep out pain. His voice softened. But walls that high also keep out everything worth living for. 10. Elena didn't respond immediately. She stared at Daniel across the table as if seeing him for the first time, this maintenance supervisor in his department store clothes who spoke to her with neither fear nor deference. In her world, men either wanted something from her or feared her. Usually both. Daniel Carter appeared to do neither. You speak with remarkable certainty, she finally said, for someone whose life experiences might justify considerable cynicism. I'm not certain about much, honestly. Daniel's expression grew thoughtful. Every morning I wonder if I'm doing right by Sophie, if Jennifer would approve of my decisions, if I'm balancing work and fatherhood well enough. Then what guides your choices? Hope, I guess. Hope that kindness matters more than momentary advantage. Hope that showing up imperfectly is better than not showing up at all. He paused. Hope that Sophie will remember how hard I tried even when I failed. Elena felt something shift in her chest, an unfamiliar sensation, like a door that had been locked for years suddenly developing a crack. That's a remarkably optimistic philosophy for a man whose wife died and whose career interview just fell through. Optimism and realism aren't mutually exclusive. I can acknowledge that tonight was a setback while still believing tomorrow might bring something better. And if it doesn't, then I'll adapt, find another way, keep moving forward. Daniel smiled slightly. Sophie's counting on me. That's all the motivation I need. The evening had grown late. Other diners had come and gone. The staff had stopped hovering, recognizing that whatever was happening at table 14 was beyond their usual scripts. Elena found herself in unfamiliar territory. She had shared more with this stranger in 2 hours than she'd shared with her therapist in 2 years. Not strategic information, personal truths. The kind she'd learned long ago to protect. I should go, she said, reaching for the check the server had discreetly placed at the table's edge. Thank you for the conversation. It was unexpected. In a good way. She considered the question seriously. In a way, I haven't decided yet. Daniel nodded, accepting the ambiguity without pushing. As Elena signed the check, adding a tip that would make the server's entire week, she found herself doing something she hadn't done in years. She acted on impulse. Give me your email address. Daniel looked up surprised. Why? The Foundation STEM program. I'll have my assistant send you the application information. She held up a hand before he could respond. Not charity. Recognition of potential. Your daughter sounds like exactly the kind of mind we should be developing. Daniel hesitated, clearly wrestling with pride. Then he thought of Sophie, of braces and engineering camp and opportunities he couldn't provide alone. He wrote his email on a napkin and slid it across the table. Thank you. Elena tucked the napkin into her bag. Don't thank me yet. The program is competitive. She'll need to earn her place. She will. The confidence in his voice carried no arrogance, just absolute faith in his daughter's abilities. They walked together toward the restaurant entrance, an unlikely pair drawing curious glances from the remaining staff. Outside, the night air was cold and crisp. Elena's driver was already waiting with the Bentley. "Can I offer you a ride somewhere?" Daniel shook his head. "I'll take the train. It's not far." The maintenance supervisor who refused to give up his table now refuses a ride home. The billionaire who demanded a stranger's table is now offering transportation. Daniel smiled. Quite a reversal. Elena felt an unexpected reluctance to end the encounter. "You challenged me tonight," she said. "Most people are too afraid to do that." "I wasn't trying to challenge you. I was just being honest." "Same thing in my experience." Daniel extended his hand. "It was interesting meeting you, Miss Blackwood." She took it, noting again the calluses, the strength, the steadiness. "Likewise, Mr. Carter." He turned and walked toward the subway station, his figure soon disappearing among the evening pedestrians. Elena settled into the Bentley's leather seats, her mind unusually quiet. Where to Miss Blackwood? Home. As the car pulled away from the curb, she found herself replaying the evening's conversation, particularly Daniel's words about walls and what they kept out. Her phone buzzed with emails demanding attention. The Stellaris acquisition, board concerns, market analyses. She silenced it. Tomorrow she would return to being Elena Blackwood, CEO. Tomorrow she would rebuild the walls that tonight had somehow developed cracks. But as the city lights blurred past her window, Elena couldn't quite shake the image of a man in a frayed collar who had looked at her billions and seen something she hadn't expected anyone to notice: her loneliness. Daniel reached his apartment just after 10. Sophie was asleep on the couch, a textbook open across her chest. Mrs. Ramirez from 3A sat in the armchair, knitting needles clicking softly. "She tried to stay awake," the elderly woman whispered. "Wanted to hear how your interview went." "The interview didn't happen. Contact never showed." Mrs. Ramirez's face fell. "Oh, Daniel, I'm sorry." "It's okay. Something else might come through." He gathered Sophie gently, her small body warm against his chest. "Thank you for watching her." "Always." Mrs. Ramirez gathered her things. "She's a good girl. You're doing right by her." After she left, Daniel carried Sophie to her bedroom, tucking the covers around her carefully. Her bridge model sat on the desk, nearly complete, a testament to her brilliant mind and endless determination. "Dad?" Her voice was drowsy, half asleep. "Hey, baby, go back to sleep." "How was your interview?" He smoothed her hair back from her forehead. "Didn't work out, but something else did. Something good." Daniel thought of Elena Blackwood, her walls and her wounds, her power and her loneliness. The foundation program that might change Sophie's trajectory. The unexpected connection that had formed across the gulf of their different worlds. "Maybe," he said softly. "We'll see." Sophie smiled, already drifting back to sleep. "You always figure it out, Dad." "Because I have you to figure it out for." He sat beside her bed long after her breathing had deepened, watching the moonlight paint shadows across her peaceful face. Jennifer's voice echoed in his memory. "Don't let bitterness steal the joy from her life, or from yours." He hadn't let bitterness win. He'd kept his promise. But tonight, for the first time in 4 years, Daniel Carter wondered if there might be more waiting for him than just survival. His phone buzzed softly, an email from an address he didn't recognize. From E. Blackwood at Blackwood Industries. Come, subject Foundation STEM Program. Mr. Carter. Our conversation prompted me to review the Foundation's STEM initiative protocols. You raised valid concerns about our selection process, inadvertently filtering out qualified candidates from under-resourced schools. Attached is information about our program for elementary-age children with aptitude in engineering and applied sciences. The application deadline has been extended. The process has been simplified, though standards remain rigorous. If Sophie is interested, I encourage you to submit an application. Your insight about walls was noted. Elena Blackwood. Daniel read the email 3 times. Then he looked at his sleeping daughter, at her bridge model gleaming softly in the moonlight, at the future he desperately wanted to give her. He began composing his reply. 3 weeks passed before Daniel heard from Elena Blackwood again. He'd submitted Sophie's application to the Foundation STEM program, attached photos of her bridge designs, written a personal statement that took him 4 drafts to get right. Then he'd waited, checking his email obsessively, telling himself it didn't matter, knowing it did. Sophie's competition entry fee came due. Daniel sold his fishing gear, picked up 2 extra weekend shifts, and still came up $40 short. Mrs. Ramirez found out somehow and slipped an envelope under his door with a note that said, "For Sophie's future, pay me back when you're rich." He never figured out how she knew. The boiler broke twice more. The building owner, Sterling Development, denied his repair requests twice more. Daniel patched what he could with parts. He bought himself, knowing it was temporary, knowing the whole system needed replacement, knowing nobody with the power to authorize it cared enough to listen. Then on a Tuesday morning, his phone buzzed with an email that changed everything. From E. Blackwood at Blackwood Industries. COM Subject STEM Program. Special invitation. Mr. Carter, Sophie's application impressed our engineering director. The Foundation would like to extend a special invitation for her to visit Blackwood Industries' research facility this Saturday. Our team is developing environmental sustainability technologies that might interest her. The visit would also provide an opportunity for preliminary assessment before formal applications close. Please advise if this would be convenient. Elena Blackwood. Daniel read the email 3 times. His emotions tangled between gratitude and wariness. This wasn't standard procedure. This was Elena Blackwood pulling strings, opening doors that should have required Sophie to knock. He should say no. Should insist his daughter earn her place through normal channels. Should protect his pride. But then, he thought about Sophie's face when she talked about engineering. The way her eyes lit up when she solved problems. The future she deserved that he couldn't provide alone. He typed his response carefully. Miss Blackwood, thank you for the invitation. Sophie would be delighted to visit the research facility this Saturday. However, I must accompany her, as I'm sure you understand. Also, we had previously planned to purchase materials for her competition project that day. Would it be possible to schedule the visit for early afternoon, allowing us to maintain our morning plans? Regards, Daniel Carter. The reply came within minutes. 11:30 would work for our team. A car will collect you both at 11:15. Please provide your address. And of course you would accompany her. She's 9. Elena. Daniel smiled, despite himself, at the slight edge in her final sentence. He'd managed to offend her by implying she might have thought otherwise. Good. Elena Blackwood could use more people willing to push back. The week crawled by. Daniel found himself thinking about Saturday more than he should have, telling himself it was about Sophie's opportunity, knowing it wasn't entirely true. Saturday morning, he took Sophie to the art supply store as planned. She moved through the aisles with scientific precision, comparing prices, evaluating materials, calculating exactly what she needed for her bridge model's final construction. Dad, this carbon fiber thread has 5 times the tensile strength of the regular kind, and 3 times the price. But it'll make the suspension cables stronger. The judges will test load-bearing capacity. Daniel looked at the price tag, looked at his daughter's hopeful face, did the math in his head. Get it. Really. Your brain is worth the investment. Sophie hugged him right there in the aisle, her small arms squeezing tight around his waist. Thanks, Dad. Don't thank me yet. You still have to win. I know. She pulled back, her expression shifting to that familiar determination. I will. At precisely 11:15, a black sedan pulled up outside their apartment building. Not a taxi, not a rideshare. A luxury vehicle with tinted windows and a uniformed driver who opened the door with formal courtesy. Sophie's eyes went wide. Is this for us? Like in the movies? Apparently so. The interior smelled of leather and subtle cologne. Technology was seamlessly integrated into every surface. As they settled into the plush seats, Sophie noticed a small gift bag with her name on it. "May I?" Daniel nodded, watching her carefully. Inside was an engineering kit. Not a toy, a professional-grade set of precision tools scaled for smaller hands. A card attached read simply, "For future innovations, EB." Sophie examined each tool with reverent fascination. "Dad, these are real instruments, like the ones professionals use." "They certainly are." The gift represented exactly what Sophie needed but could never have afforded. Quality instruments that respected her serious interest, rather than treating it as a child's passing fancy. Daniel felt the familiar tug between gratitude and discomfort, pride and pragmatism. The car delivered them to Blackwood Industries headquarters, 40 stories of glass and steel that reflected the sky. Daniel had passed this building countless times without truly seeing it. A physical manifestation of everything Elena had built from betrayal and determination. A private entrance. A security bypass. An elevator that whisked them to the 38th floor. The doors opened onto a laboratory that looked more like science fiction than corporate facility. Sophie grabbed Daniel's hand, overwhelmed, but eyes shining. "Dad, look at everything!" Scientists in white coats moved between workstations. Holographic displays showed rotating molecular structures. 3D printers constructed intricate components. An artificial ecosystem occupied an entire glass-walled chamber. And then Elena appeared. She'd exchanged her business suit for dark slacks and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than Daniel's monthly rent. Her hair fell in loose waves, rather than the severe style he remembered softening her features in a way that momentarily caught him off guard. "Mr. Carter, Sophie, welcome to Blackwood Industries." She approached with measured steps, her gaze assessing them both with equal intensity. "Thank you for arranging this," Daniel said, suddenly aware of his worn jeans, the small paint stain on his sleeve from the art store. Elena's attention shifted to Sophie. "And you must be the engineer I've heard about. Your rainwater collection system was quite impressive." Sophie straightened her natural shyness, momentarily overcome by pride. "Thank you, Miss Blackwood. Dad helped with the flow calculations." "A productive collaboration, then." Elena gestured toward the laboratory. "Would you like to see what we're working on here? Some of our environmental engineers are developing water purification systems that might interest you." What followed was unlike anything Daniel had expected. Elena led them through the facility, introducing researchers who treated Sophie not as a child, but as a young colleague. They explained concepts in simplified terms without condescension, answered her increasingly technical questions with genuine engagement. One scientist demonstrated a miniature water filtration system designed for emergency deployment in disaster zones. "The challenge is creating something portable enough for airdrops, but robust enough to function in extreme conditions," she explained, showing Sophie the internal components. Sophie studied the design for a long moment. Then she pointed to the current linear arrangement. "What if you layered the filtration stages in concentric circles instead of stacking them? It would take up less vertical space but still maintain the surface area." The scientist blinked, exchanged a glance with Elena. "That's actually a very interesting approach. We hadn't considered that configuration." Elena's expression revealed nothing, but Daniel caught a flicker of something in her eyes. Satisfaction. Vindication. They moved to a conference room for lunch. Not a cafeteria affair, but an elegant spread that reminded Daniel of their dinner at Le Chateau. As Sophie examined a 3D printed model of a sustainable housing project, Elena turned to Daniel. "Your daughter has impressive spatial reasoning. Her ability to visualize alternative configurations is unusually developed for her age. She gets that from her mother." The familiar pride mixed with lingering grief. "Jennifer could look at a problem from angles most people never considered. And from you, I suspect." Elena's gaze remained steady. "Your maintenance work requires similar skills. understanding how systems interconnect, identifying failure points, developing solutions with limited resources. The observation surprised him. Few people recognize the intellectual components of his profession. Different applications of the same principles, he acknowledged. Sophie returned to the table, eyes bright with excitement. "Dad, they have a wind tunnel for testing aerodynamic designs. Dr. Patel said I could try different bridge structures in it to see which ones have the least resistance." "That sounds amazing, Soph." Daniel glanced at Elena. "Though I wouldn't want to impose on Dr. Patel's time." "It's no imposition," Elena replied smoothly. "Our Saturday research team often tests personal projects. It keeps creative thinking fresh." As lunch progressed, Daniel noticed Elena observing the interaction between him and Sophie with unusual attention. Her analytical mind seemed to be cataloging their relationship dynamics, studying something she didn't fully understand. When Sophie excused herself to use the restroom, Elena's professional veneer slipped slightly. "She's quite remarkable," she said. The admission carried genuine admiration, rather than perfunctory praise. Not just intellectually, but her approach to challenges. Most children her age become frustrated when their initial ideas don't work immediately. Sophie understands that failure is part of the process. "We have a rule at home: you're not allowed to quit until you've tried at least 3 different approaches." A valuable philosophy. Elena's tone carried unexpected sincerity. "One many of my executives could benefit from adopting." Before Daniel could respond, her phone vibrated. She glanced at the screen, her expression hardening. "Problem. My COO, conducting parallel negotiations on the Stellaris acquisition without board approval." She set down the phone with controlled force. "Marcus was my fiancé once, before he decided my obsession with success made me difficult to live with. Now he's attempting to undermine the most significant acquisition of my career." The unexpected personal disclosure hung between them. "That must be complicated," Daniel said carefully. "Working with someone who betrayed you." "Business often requires compartmentalization." "Compartmentalization. Is that what you call it?" Elena's eyes met his. "What would you call it?" "Punishment. For both of you." Daniel held her gaze. "You keep him close so you can watch him. He stays because proximity to your success is better than distance from it. Neither of you moves on." The assessment was blunt. Most people would never dare speak to Elena Blackwood this way. "You presume to understand my professional relationships based on a single conversation. I understand that holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die." Daniel's voice softened. "Someone smarter than me said that. Took me a while to learn it was true. After your wife passed. After everything. Grief, betrayal, disappointment." He glanced toward the door Sophie had disappeared through. "Sophie needed a father who wasn't consumed by bitterness. That meant letting go of things I thought I'd never forgive." Elena was quiet for a long moment. "And did you forgive?" "Some things. Others I just stopped carrying, put them down and walked away." Daniel shrugged. "The weight was killing me. I had to choose between holding on to my anger and holding on to my daughter. Couldn't do both." Sophie returned before Elena could respond, oblivious to the tension she'd interrupted. The rest of the visit proceeded with Elena maintaining professional distance, though Daniel occasionally caught her watching him interact with Sophie, her expression thoughtful rather than analytical. When they prepared to leave, Elena escorted them personally to the elevator rather than delegating to an assistant. "Sophie, our foundation director, would like to speak with you briefly before you go. She has some questions about your competition project." As Sophie moved toward the foundation director, Elena turned to Daniel, her voice lowered for privacy. "I received information about Sterling Development's plans for your building." Daniel went still. "What kind of information?" "The materials they're sourcing for the electrical upgrades are potentially dangerous. Counterfeit components that don't meet safety codes." "How did you?" I make it my business to know about significant real estate developments in the city. Her tone left no room for questions, particularly when they involve questionable safety practices. Daniel's mind raced. The denied repair requests, the substandard parts, the boiler that kept failing no matter how many times he patched it. The city inspectors are being paid to look the other way, he said quietly. I've suspected it for months, but couldn't prove anything. Documentation could be arranged, provided someone had the expertise to identify the counterfeit components and the access to document them properly. Daniel understood what she was proposing. Help, resources, the kind of intervention he couldn't accomplish alone. I'd need to be directly involved, he said. This affects my residents personally. Mrs. Chen has lived in her apartment for 47 years. The Rodriguez family has 3 children under 10. They deserve safe housing, not profits built on dangerous shortcuts. Elena nodded once. I'll have my team contact you with the necessary information. The documentation will require your expertise to be credible. Why are you doing this? The question emerged before he could stop it. Elena regarded him for a long moment, something unreadable moving behind her careful composure. You told me that walls keep out everything worth living for. I'm testing that theory. Before Daniel could respond, Sophie returned excited about her conversation with the foundation director. As they prepared to enter the elevator, Elena addressed Sophie directly. Your bridge design for the competition, what materials are you using for the final model? Balsa wood, carbon fiber thread for the tension elements, and a special resin Dad found that creates stronger joints. Elena nodded thoughtfully. Our materials science division recently developed a composite that might be interesting for your tension elements. It has 5 times the strength-to-weight ratio of standard options. She glanced at Daniel. With your permission, I could have samples sent for her project. Daniel recognized the careful phrasing. Elena was deliberately asking his permission rather than simply offering materials directly to Sophie. Respecting his parental authority, despite her ability to provide resources, he couldn't. That would be very helpful. Thank you. As the elevator doors closed, Sophie's excitement bubbled over. Dad, did you see the wind tunnel and the 3D printers? And Dr. Patel said my idea about the filtration system was genuinely innovative. Daniel smiled at her joy. I saw. You impressed some very smart people today, Soph. Miss Blackwood isn't as scary as she looks on TV. Sophie's observation carried characteristic directness. She listened to my ideas like they mattered. Because they do matter. She looks at you funny, though. Daniel's step faltered. What do you mean? Like she's trying to figure out a really interesting puzzle. The same way she looked at my bridge design, except different. Sophie shrugged. I don't know. It's just something I noticed. The car returned them home, where they found a package waiting at their apartment door. Inside were professional-grade modeling materials, including the specialized composite Elena had mentioned. A note on Blackwood Industries' letterhead read, For your competition project, our materials science team is interested in your results. Later that evening, after Sophie had fallen asleep, surrounded by bridge design sketches, Daniel's phone buzzed with another email. Delivery schedules for Sterling Development's building materials. Security access codes for the construction site. Contact information for a city council member with oversight of building safety regulations. No personal note. No signature. Just the tools he needed to protect his residence. Daniel stared at the information, understanding the magnitude of what Elena was offering. Resources. Connections. The kind of leverage he'd never had access to before. His phone buzzed again. This time, a personal message. The foundation director was extremely impressed with Sophie. Preliminary acceptance into the STEM program is likely pending final review. Also, thank you for today. The conversation was illuminating. Elena Daniel read the message twice, noting the shift from formal email to something more personal. The crack in her walls was widening. He typed his response carefully. "Thank you for creating this opportunity for Sophie. And for the building information. I'll make sure it's used properly. Today was illuminating for me as well. Turns out, billionaires are almost human." He hesitated over the last line, wondering if the humor was appropriate. Then he remembered her slight smile when he'd refused to move from his table at Le Chateau. The way she'd pushed back rather than retreating. He hit send. Her response came quickly. "Almost human. I'll add that to my resume. Good night, Mr. Carter. Good night, Miss Blackwood." The exchange was brief, almost playful, nothing like the cold, professional tone of their earlier communications. Daniel set down his phone and looked around his small apartment. The cramped kitchen, the worn furniture, the water stain on the ceiling he'd been meaning to fix for 3 months. Everything about his world was modest, limited, struggling. Everything about Elena's world was expansive, powerful, protected. Yet somehow, improbably, their separate worlds had begun to intersect. He thought about what she'd said about testing theories, about walls, and what they kept out. He thought about Sophie's observation that Elena looked at him like a puzzle she was trying to solve. He thought about Jennifer, about her last words, about the promise he'd made to not let bitterness steal their joy. 4 years ago, Daniel Carter had been certain his life was over. His wife was gone. His future was survival, nothing more. He'd accepted that some doors would never open for people like him. But tonight, sitting in his worn apartment with his brilliant daughter asleep in the next room, Daniel wondered if maybe, just maybe, he'd been wrong. Some doors didn't need to be opened. They needed to be built, like bridges. The call came at 6:47 a.m. on a Monday. Daniel was already awake, reviewing the delivery schedules Elena had sent, planning his approach to documenting the counterfeit materials. His phone buzzed with Dave Morrison's name on the screen. "Dave, it's early." "I know. Listen, I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but I just processed paperwork for Sterling Development. They're changing the building classification. Permits to convert to luxury micro-units. Construction starts January." Daniel's stomach dropped. They already sent eviction notices. 60 days to clear out or pay triple rent. "There's more." Dave's voice lowered. "The plans I saw, they're cutting corners on electrical upgrades. Same subcontractor that did that high-rise in River North. The one where they had the fire last year. The one where they installed counterfeit circuit breakers." Daniel's grip tightened on the phone. "People died in that fire, Dave." "Exactly. Same contractor, same suppliers. Sterling's trying to maximize profit margins by using gray market parts." Dave paused. "They're paying off inspectors, Dan. City's looking the other way. I need to report this. Be careful. These guys have connections. My boss made it clear this is a major client we don't cross." Daniel hung up and stared at the ceiling, his mind racing. This wasn't just negligence anymore. This was knowing endangerment. People could die. Mrs. Chen, who'd lived in 4B for 47 years. The Rodriguez family, with their 3 kids under 10. The Novaks expecting their first baby in February. His people. His responsibility. He pulled up Elena's contact information, then hesitated. They'd exchanged a few messages, since Saturday brief and professional. Asking for more help felt like crossing a line. But this was bigger than his pride. He dialed before he could talk himself out of it. "Blackwood. It's Daniel Carter. I need to move faster on the building documentation." What happened? He told her everything Dave had shared. The counterfeit materials, the paid inspectors, the fire in River North. When he finished, Elena was silent for a long moment. "I'll have my legal team contact the city council member today. We need to accelerate the inspection timeline." Elena. He caught himself using her first name, waited for her to correct him. She didn't. "This could blow back on you. Sterling has connections throughout the city." "So do I." Her voice carried a hard edge he hadn't heard before. "And my connections don't depend on bribes and intimidation." "Why are you doing this? Really?" Another pause. When she spoke again, Something had shifted in her tone. "You told me that dignity matters regardless of who's at the table. These people, your neighbors, they deserve someone fighting for them. You can't do it alone. I can help." She paused. "Let me help." 3 words that cost her more than she probably wanted to admit. "Okay," Daniel said. "Tell me what you need from me." The next 4 days blurred together. Daniel documented everything. Photographed delivery manifests. Recorded serial numbers from electrical components. Compiled maintenance reports showing the systematic neglect that had preceded Sterling's acquisition. Elena's attorney, Catherine Winters, called twice to review his findings. Her questions were sharp, specific, designed to build an airtight case that couldn't be dismissed or minimized. "The documentation is remarkably comprehensive," she said during their second call. "You have a gift for systematic analysis, Mr. Carter. I fix things for a living. Understanding how systems fail is part of the job." "Well, your understanding might save lives. The inspection is scheduled for Wednesday. Be ready." On Tuesday night, Daniel was finishing dinner with Sophie when someone pounded on his door. He opened it to find Sterling himself in the hallway, flanked by a man in an expensive suit who radiated lawyer. "Carter, we need to talk." "About what?" Sterling pushed past him into the apartment. Sophie looked up from her homework, eyes wide. "Soph, go to your room." "But Dad?" "Now, honey." She gathered her books and retreated, casting worried glances over her shoulder. Sterling waited until her door closed. "You've been making inquiries, talking to people you shouldn't be talking to." "I've been doing my job, documenting safety concerns." "Your job is maintaining this building, not running to city council members with fabricated complaints." "Nothing I've documented is fabricated. Your materials don't meet code. Your contractor has a history of cutting corners. People died in that River North fire, Sterling. I'm not going to let that happen here." Sterling's lawyer stepped forward. "Mr. Carter, you signed a confidentiality agreement when you were hired. Any disclosure of proprietary information to outside parties constitutes breach of contract. Safety violations aren't proprietary information. They're public hazards." "That's a matter of legal interpretation." The lawyer's smile didn't reach his eyes. "One that could be very expensive for you to contest." Sterling moved closer, his voice dropping. "Let me be clear. You drop this crusade, the inspection goes away, and everyone moves on. You keep pushing, and I will destroy you. Not just fire you, destroy you. Every property manager in Chicago will know your name. You'll never work in this city again." Daniel held his ground. "And if someone dies because you used counterfeit materials, what then?" "That's a hypothetical I don't concern myself with. It's a hypothetical that keeps me up at night." Daniel stepped toward Sterling, matching his aggressive posture. "I've got a daughter in the next room. She's 9 years old, and she thinks I'm the kind of man who does the right thing even when it's hard. I'm not about to prove her wrong." Sterling studied him for a long moment, then shook his head slowly. "You're fired. Effective immediately. Clear out your apartment by Friday." "You can't." "I just did." "And Carter?" Sterling paused at the door. "That daughter of yours is going to watch her father fail. Going to watch him lose everything because he couldn't keep his mouth shut. How's she going to feel about your principles then?" The door slammed behind them. Daniel stood motionless, his heart pounding. Sterling's threat echoing in his ears. Friday. 4 days to find new housing, new employment, new stability for Sophie in the middle of December. "Dad." Sophie's voice came from her doorway, small and frightened. "Hey, baby, it's okay. That man was really angry. He said you're fired." Daniel crossed to her, kneeling so they were eye to eye. "Yes, I am. Because you reported the dangerous wires. Because I did the right thing and he didn't like it." Sophie's chin trembled, but she lifted it. "Mom always said doing the right thing isn't always easy." She was right. Daniel pulled her into a hug, feeling her small body tremble against his chest. "But we'll figure this out. We always do. Promise." Promise. He held her until she stopped shaking, until her breathing steadied, until she was ready to return to her homework with the resilience that constantly amazed him. Then he stepped onto the small balcony and called Elena. "Daniel, it's late." "Sterling was just here. He fired me. Threatened to blacklist me throughout the industry. We have until Friday to clear out." Silence on the line. Then, "Are you and Sophie safe?" "For now, but—" His voice cracked. He forced it steady. "I don't know what to do. I've got nothing saved, nowhere to go, and Sophie's competition is next week, and I promised her—" "Stop!" Elena's voice cut through his spiral. "Listen to me. I own a building on Wellington Avenue. 2-bedroom apartment vacant, recently renovated. It's yours. I can't accept. You can and you will. Your daughter needs stability right now, not your pride." The words hit harder than Sterling's threats. "Elena, I don't want charity." "It's not charity. It's a practical solution to a temporary problem." Her tone softened slightly. "It's what someone would do for a friend." Friend. The word hung between them, neither fully accurate nor entirely wrong. "I'll pay market rent," Daniel insisted. "We can discuss terms later. Right now, focus on getting through the inspection tomorrow. Catherine will have someone meet you at City Hall at 9. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. We haven't won anything." The inspection team arrived at 10 a.m. Wednesday, led by a gray-haired woman named Inspector Davis, whose weathered expression suggested she'd seen every possible violation during her career. Daniel provided his documentation, answered her questions, walked her through the building's systems, pointing out each deficiency, each shortcut, each danger waiting to happen. Sterling appeared with his lawyer at 11, hovering at the edges of the inspection, making whispered comments to individual team members. Daniel watched his influence work in real time, subtle glances, slight nods, the body language of corruption. At noon, Inspector Davis pulled him aside. "Mr. Carter, I'll be direct. My team is finding exactly what your documentation indicated: counterfeit components, substandard materials, numerous code violations that create dangerous conditions." Relief flooded through Daniel. "That's good, isn't it? The violations will be documented." Davis's mouth tightened. "Ordinarily, yes. But Sterling's attorney is already suggesting your documentation was fabricated out of retaliation for termination. There's pressure from within the department to minimize findings. The materials are physically present. How can that be disputed? Some violations might be attributed to supplier error rather than deliberate negligence. Others might be classified as minor infractions requiring correction, but not preventing renovation." She held his gaze. "You understand what I'm saying?" Daniel understood perfectly. The system was protecting the powerful. What can be done? Independent verification from a recognized authority would make it harder to dismiss these findings. Someone whose reputation can't be easily attacked. Daniel pulled out his phone and texted Elena 2 words: "Need help." 20 minutes later, a black sedan pulled up outside the building. Dr. Alan Nakamura emerged, credentials from MIT expert witness in 3 states' congressional testimony on building safety standards. Elena's cavalry arriving just when Daniel needed it most. By late afternoon, the inspection had documented 17 critical safety violations, each photographed, measured, and verified by Nakamura's expertise. Sterling's fury was barely contained. Inspector Davis approached Daniel as her team finished. "The violations will be filed today. Sterling Development will receive a stop work order until all issues are addressed with approved materials." Daniel thanked her, but felt no triumph. Only relief that his neighbors wouldn't die in a preventable fire. As the inspection team departed, Sterling cornered him one last time. "You think you've won. This building will still be converted. The violations will be addressed, the renovation will proceed, and the tenants will still be priced out. All you've done is delay the inevitable while destroying your own career." "Maybe, but at least they'll be alive to complain about rent increases." Sterling's face twisted. "You're a fool, Carter. A self-righteous fool, who's about to discover just how small he really is. That evening, Daniel received a text from Dave. Sterling fired me as their insurance broker. Word is they found out I was asking questions about material suppliers. Watch your back, Dan. These guys play dirty. Daniel showed the message to Sophie, who was packing her belongings with surprising calmness. Dad, are we going to be okay? Yes, baby. We're going to be okay. You keep saying that. Because it keeps being true. He pulled her close. Miss Blackwood has an apartment for us. New job starting in January. Your competition is still happening. We're going to be okay. Sophie studied his face, the way she always did when she was trying to determine if he was telling the truth or just being optimistic. I believe you, she finally said. I just wanted to make sure you believed you. The call came on Thursday, 3 days before Christmas. Daniel was at the Wellington Avenue apartment unpacking boxes while Sophie arranged her bridge building materials on her new desk. His phone buzzed with a number he didn't recognize. Mr. Carter, this is Mercy General. Mrs. Chen from your former building was admitted this morning. She listed you as her emergency contact. Daniel's blood went cold. What happened? She fell in her apartment. Broken hip. She's asking for you. He made it to the hospital in 20 minutes, leaving Sophie with strict instructions to stay inside and not answer the door for anyone. Mrs. Chen looked impossibly small in the hospital bed, her face pale against the white sheets' IV lines trailing from her weathered arms. Daniel, her voice was a whisper. I'm sorry to bother you. You're never a bother, Mrs. Chen. He took her hand, feeling the fragile bones beneath paper-thin skin. What happened? I was getting up to check the heat. The radiator was making that noise again, the one you always fixed. Her eyes clouded with tears. I forgot you weren't there anymore. The guilt hit Daniel like a physical blow. He should have been there. Should have checked on her. Should have made sure she was safe before he left. I'm so sorry. No, you did what was right. Mrs. Chen squeezed his hand with surprising strength. That Sterling man, he doesn't care about us. Never did. But you cared. Her voice cracked. Promise me something, Daniel. Anything. Don't let them take my home. I've lived there 47 years. My Harold died there. All my memories are in those walls. Daniel thought about Sterling's eviction notice, the 60-day deadline, the luxury conversion that would erase everything Mrs. Chen had built. I'm doing everything I can. I know. She closed her eyes. You're a good man, like Harold was. Sophie is lucky. The surgeon appeared an hour later, professionally efficient, as he explained the procedure. Broken hip, clean break, good prognosis for someone her age. But recovery would be long. Months of rehabilitation. Skilled nursing care before she could return home. Does she have family who can help with arrangements? The doctor asked. Her children live out of state. I'm her building superintendent. Daniel rubbed his tired eyes. Former superintendent. She's fortunate to have such a dedicated advocate. After the doctor left, Daniel sat in the waiting room, the weight of responsibility crushing down on him. Mrs. Chen would lose her apartment during rehabilitation. By the time she recovered, the building would be converted. Her home of 47 years transformed into something she could never afford. Without conscious decision, he found himself calling Elena. She answered on the second ring. Daniel, what's wrong? He told her about Mrs. Chen. The words tumbled out, disorganized, emotional, nothing like his usual careful communication. Which hospital? Northwestern Memorial. But I wasn't asking you to. I serve on Northwestern's board. Stay where you are. I'll make some calls. The line went dead before he could protest. 30 minutes later, a hospital administrator approached with a deferential manner Daniel had never experienced. Mr. Carter, I understand you're Mrs. Chen's representative. We've arranged for her to receive VIP care, a place at Lakeside Rehabilitation Center when she's ready for transfer. All expenses covered through the hospital's community care fund. Daniel recognized the fiction for what it was. Elena's influence creating opportunities where bureaucracy would have created obstacles. His phone buzzed with her text. Mrs. Chen's housing situation will be addressed. Focus on your daughter tonight. We'll discuss next steps tomorrow. The blizzard hit Saturday afternoon. Weather forecasters had been warning about it for days, a historic storm system barreling toward Chicago with the fury of something biblical. Daniel had prepared their new apartment with emergency supplies reinforced the weatherproofing stocked enough food for a week. By evening, wind howled through the streets. Snow accumulated at terrifying rates, and temperatures plummeted toward record lows. The power went out at 8:47 p.m. Daniel was reading Sophie a bedtime story when the lights flickered and died. She clutched his arm, her face illuminated only by the camping lantern he'd already set up. Dad. It's okay, baby. I've got this. He checked his phone. Cell service was spotty but functional. A text from Elena. Wellington Avenue backup generator failed. Repair crews can't get through until morning. Are you prepared? We're fine, he replied. Plenty of supplies, warm blankets. We'll make an adventure of it. 30 minutes later, someone knocked on their door. Daniel opened it to find Elena standing in the hallway, snowflakes melting in her hair, her usual elegant attire replaced by practical winter gear that somehow still looked expensive. The generator, she said without preamble. I've brought additional supplies. He stared at her. You drove here in this blizzard. I have a vehicle equipped for these conditions. She glanced past him, noticing Sophie's blanket fort, illuminated by lantern light. I see you're already well prepared. Dad always keeps emergency supplies, Sophie called from her fort. He says it's better to have things you don't need than need things you don't have. A practical philosophy. Elena remained in the doorway, suddenly uncertain. If you're adequately supplied, I won't intrude. Daniel saw something in her expression he'd never expected. Vulnerability. Elena Blackwood, billion-dollar CEO, standing in his hallway, wanting to be invited in but afraid to ask. Please come in. We have plenty of soup, and Sophie was just about to challenge me to a card game she claims I can't win. Elena entered, removing her snow-covered boots. Sophie emerged from her fort immediately. Did you really drive through the blizzard just to check on us? I was concerned about the generator failure. Wellington Avenue is an older building. The heating systems aren't as reliable during extended power outages. You could have called, Daniel pointed out. Elena hesitated. Cell service is becoming unreliable. Some situations warrant direct verification. The explanation was logical, but incomplete. Sophie studied Elena with that perceptive gaze she'd inherited from both parents. I think you were lonely, Sophie said with characteristic directness, and worried about us, about... The simple observation stripped away Elena's careful composure. For a moment, she looked almost fragile. Perhaps, Elena admitted quietly. Both of those things. They spent the evening in unexpected harmony. Soup heated on the camping stove, card games by lantern light, Sophie explaining her bridge design while Elena offered suggestions that respected her knowledge while gently expanding her understanding. When the temperature dropped further, they gathered in Sophie's blanket fort, the three of them huddled together against the cold. I haven't been in a blanket fort since I was 6, Elena admitted. My brother and I used to build them when our parents were away on business. You have a brother? Sophie asked. Yes, Michael. He works in venture capital now. Is he nice? A shadow crossed Elena's face. We don't see much of each other anymore. Why not? Daniel watched Elena struggle with how to answer. How do you explain betrayal to a 9-year-old? Sometimes people make choices that make it difficult to maintain relationships. Elena finally said, My brother and I had a disagreement about business ethics many years ago. We never resolved our differences. That's sad, Sophie declared. Dad says family arguments are like bridge designs. If the tension isn't properly distributed, the whole structure fails. Elena laughed, a genuine sound that transformed her features. Your father has a remarkable way of applying practical wisdom to complex situations." Sophie eventually fell asleep, wrapped in blankets between them. Daniel and Elena sat in companionable silence, watching her breathe with the peaceful abandon only children could achieve during crisis. "She's remarkable," Elena said softly. "Her resilience, her emotional intelligence. You've done an extraordinary job raising her alone." "I can't take all the credit. Jennifer established a strong foundation. Still," Elena's voice carried something new, warmth perhaps, or recognition. "The environment you've created for her, the stability, the encouragement, that's not accidental." Daniel found himself studying her profile in the lantern light. Softer than the boardroom version, more human than the magazine covers suggested. "Why did you really come tonight, Elena?" She was silent for a long moment. "I was concerned about the generator. That part was true." She paused. "But I could have sent someone, could have called the building manager. There were more efficient options than personally driving through a blizzard. And yet, when I thought about you and Sophie alone in a powerless building on the coldest night of the year," she turned to face him, "I couldn't focus on anything else. I needed to see for myself that you were both safe." The admission hung between them, not a declaration, but an acknowledgement that something had shifted. "I'm glad you came," Daniel said. Elena nodded, neither pushing for more, nor retreating from the moment. Sophie stirred in her sleep, mumbling something about tension cables. "She talks about bridge engineering even in her dreams." Daniel smiled. Passion reveals itself in unexpected ways. Elena's gaze remained on Sophie. "Her competition is in 4 days. Will she be ready?" "Almost. We need to complete final stress tests and add decorative elements. She's determined to make it both structurally sound and aesthetically pleasing. Form and function in perfect balance. A worthy goal." Elena paused. "In engineering and in life." The words carried weight beyond their surface meaning. Daniel heard the philosophy she was describing and the struggle she was experiencing living it. They talked through the night as the storm raged outside. About Sophie's potential. About Mrs. Chen's recovery. About the complicated dance between pride and pragmatism that defined Daniel's relationship with Elena's help. About walls and what happened when they finally came down. Near dawn, as the first gray light filtered through snow-covered windows, Elena checked her phone. "Power should be restored within the hour. I should go." "You shouldn't drive in these conditions." "The roads will be better now. Plows have been working through the night." Daniel recognized the retreat for what it was, Elena rebuilding walls she'd allowed to crumble during the night. The intimacy of their shared crisis made her uncomfortable in daylight. "Thank you for coming," he said. "It meant a lot, to both of us." Elena paused at the door, her expression softening briefly. "Merry Christmas, Daniel." "Merry Christmas, Elena." She left before Sophie woke up, but her presence lingered in the apartment like warmth after a fire. On the counter, Daniel found a small envelope he hadn't noticed before. Inside were 2 tickets to the Christmas performance at the Chicago Symphony Orchestra scheduled for that evening. A handwritten note accompanied them. Sophie mentioned she'd never been to a symphony. Perhaps tonight would be a good time to change that. E. Daniel looked at the tickets at his sleeping daughter, at the space where Elena had been. Something was building between them. Something neither of them had planned. Something that terrified and exhilarated him in equal measure. He tucked the tickets into his pocket and began making breakfast. Sophie would need her strength for the competition ahead, and Daniel would need his for whatever came next. The symphony changed everything. Sophie sat between Daniel and Elena in the concert hall, her eyes wide as the orchestra filled the space with sound. She'd never experienced anything like it, the way music could become physical, pressing against her chest, making her feel things she couldn't name. Elena watched Sophie, more than the performance, her expression carrying something Daniel had never seen before. Wonder, perhaps, or recognition of what she'd missed building her empire instead of her life. During intermission, Sophie grabbed Elena's hand without thinking. The violins all play different notes, but they make one sound. Like my bridge cables. Different tensions creating unified strength. Elena didn't pull away. That's exactly right. It's called harmony in music. In engineering, we call it load distribution. Same principle, different application. You're going to change the world someday, Sophie Carter. Sophie beamed. Dad says that too, but it means more when two people say it. Daniel caught Elena's eye over his daughter's head. Something passed between them. Gratitude, connection. The beginning of something neither was ready to name. After the concert, they walked through streets, still recovering from the blizzard. Sophie held both their hands swinging between them, like children do when they feel completely safe. This was the best Christmas ever, she declared, even better than when Mom made the snow angels with me. The mention of Jennifer landed gently, not painfully. Progress. Your mother made snow angels, Elena asked. Every first snow. She said it was important to remember how to play even when you're a grown-up. Sophie looked up at Elena. Do you remember how to play? Elena's step faltered slightly. It's been a long time since anyone asked me that. That's sad. Playing is important for brain development. Dad read me a study about it. Daniel laughed despite himself. She weaponizes research against me constantly. A formidable skill. Elena's voice carried warmth. Sophie, I think I've forgotten how to play. Perhaps you could remind me sometime. Tomorrow, Sophie declared. We're finishing my bridge model. You could help. Sophie, Miss Blackwood is very busy. I'd like that, Elena interrupted, if your father doesn't mind. Daniel looked at his daughter's hopeful face, at Elena's carefully guarded expression that couldn't quite hide her own hope. I don't mind at all. Elena arrived at 10 the next morning with professional-grade adhesive specialized measuring tools and coffee that probably cost more than Daniel's weekly grocery budget. The adhesive has a 12-hour cure time, she explained, spreading materials across their dining table. We'll need to work in stages to ensure proper bonding. Sophie examined each item with scientific precision. This is the same equipment they use in your research lab. Because precision matters at every scale. Your bridge will be tested under stress. The joints need to be perfect. They worked together through the morning, Elena and Sophie debating tension distributions, while Daniel handled the physical assembly. The collaboration was seamless. Sophie's innovative thinking, Elena's technical expertise, Daniel's practical experience, merging into something none of them could have created alone. The secondary supports need to angle 15 degrees from vertical, Sophie explained, pointing to her design notes. That distributes the load more efficiently than perpendicular placement. Elena studied the calculations. You derived this yourself. Dad helped me understand the math, but I figured out the application. It's elegant work. Most engineers take years to develop this kind of intuitive understanding. Sophie's chest puffed with pride. Daniel felt his heart swell, watching them, his brilliant daughter, and this complicated woman, finding common ground over stress calculations and tensile strength. His phone buzzed. Catherine Winters, Elena's attorney. Daniel, good news. The inspection findings have been officially filed. Sterling Development received the stop work order this morning. They're contesting it, of course, but Dr. Nakamura's verification makes their case essentially unwinnable. What happens to the tenants? The conversion is delayed indefinitely. At minimum 6 months, possibly longer, depending on how Sterling handles the remediation. Catherine paused. Elena also asked me to inform you that Mrs. Chen's apartment has been modified with senior accessibility features. She can move in after rehabilitation. The building's new ownership made accommodations. Daniel's mind caught on the phrase. New ownership. Blackwood Holdings acquired a controlling interest in the property this morning. Elena felt it was the most efficient solution to the housing situation. Daniel looked at Elena, who was helping Sophie apply adhesive with steady hands, pretending not to listen to his conversation. She bought the building. She acquired controlling interest in the holding company that owns the building. Different structure, same result. Catherine's voice carried a hint of amusement. Elena has particular ways of solving problems. After hanging up, Daniel watched Elena guide Sophie's hands through a delicate procedure, explaining the chemistry of adhesive bonding with patience he'd never expected from someone who ran billion-dollar acquisitions. "You bought the building," he said quietly. Elena didn't look up. "I acquired a position that allows influence over management decisions." That's not an answer. It's the accurate answer. She finally met his eyes. Mrs. Chen deserves to die in her home surrounded by her memories. The Rodriguez children deserve stability. Your former neighbors deserve protection from predatory development. And you just happen to have the resources to provide that protection. I have resources. I'm choosing how to use them. Elena's voice carried an edge. Would you prefer I let Sterling proceed? Let Mrs. Chen lose everything she's built. Watch families displaced during winter because I was too cautious about appearances. Daniel absorbed her words, recognizing the defensive posture that came from a lifetime of people questioning her motives. Thank you, he said simply. Elena blinked, clearly expecting argument rather than gratitude. You're welcome. Sophie looked between them with the knowing expression she'd developed recently. Are you two fighting or flirting? I can never tell with grown-ups. Daniel choked on nothing. Elena's composure cracked into something that might have been a laugh. We're negotiating, Elena managed. It's what adults do when they care about different aspects of the same situation. Sounds like flirting to me. Sophie returned to her bridge model with studied innocence. Can you hand me the carbon fiber thread, please? The rest of the day passed in comfortable rhythm. They broke for lunch sandwiches Daniel made while Elena and Sophie argued about optimal cable tension. They resumed work through the afternoon, the bridge taking shape under their combined attention. By evening, the model was complete. Sophie stood back to admire it, her face glowing with accomplishment. It's beautiful, she breathed. And it was. The bridge arched gracefully across its supports cables, creating a web of interconnected strength, every joint precise, every angle calculated, form and function in perfect balance. The judges will be impressed, Elena said. But more importantly, the engineering is sound. This will hold under stress. We should test it. Sophie's voice carried nervousness beneath excitement. Before the competition, make sure it works. Daniel retrieved the weights they'd calibrated for testing. They gathered around the dining table as Sophie positioned the first weight on the bridge's center point. The structure held. Second weight. Third. Fourth. Sophie's hands trembled as she added the fifth weight, exceeding the requirements for the intermediate category. The bridge held. Dad. Her voice was barely a whisper. It's working. Because you designed it right. Daniel pulled her into a hug, feeling her small body vibrate with joy. I'm so proud of you, Soph. Elena stood slightly apart, watching their celebration with an expression Daniel couldn't quite read. Something between happiness and longing. Joy witnessed rather than shared. Sophie broke from Daniel's embrace and threw her arms around Elena before anyone could react. Thank you for helping me. Thank you for everything. Elena froze for a moment, clearly unaccustomed to spontaneous affection. Then slowly, her arms came up to return the embrace. You did the work, Sophie. I just offered suggestions. You did more than that. Sophie pulled back, looking up at Elena with those perceptive eyes. You made Dad smile different, like he used to smile when Mom was alive. The observation dropped into the room like a stone into still water. Daniel felt his face heat. Elena's composure flickered, vulnerability breaking through before she could suppress it. I should go, Elena said quickly. Early meetings tomorrow. The competition is in 3 days. Sophie, you should rest and review your presentation notes. Will you come to the competition? Elena hesitated, glancing at Daniel as if seeking permission. I have a board meeting that morning, she said carefully. But I could attend the afternoon session if your father thinks that's appropriate. Daniel nodded, not trusting his voice. Then I'll be there. Elena gathered her things with movements that betrayed her discomfort. Good night, Sophie. Good night, Daniel. After she left, Sophie helped Daniel clean up the workspace, her silence unusual, and waited. Dad. Yeah, baby. Do you like Miss Blackwood? Like how you liked Mom? The question he'd been dreading asked with characteristic directness. It's complicated, Soph. Grown-ups always say that when they mean yes, but they're scared. Daniel set down the tools he'd been organizing. When did you get so smart about people? I've always been smart about people. Mom said I got it from you. Sophie climbed onto a chair to meet his eyes at her level. She also said you'd be sad for a while after she was gone, but that I should make sure you didn't stay sad forever. She said that at the hospital, when you went to get coffee. Sophie's voice carried the matter-of-fact tone children use when delivering profound truths. She made me promise to take care of you, to make sure you found happy again. Daniel's throat tightened. 4 years of believing he was protecting Sophie from grief, and she'd been carrying her own promise all along. I think Miss Blackwood could be part of happy, Sophie continued. She looks at you like you're important. Not like money important or work important. Like you important. How do you know the difference? Because I know how Mom used to look at you. And it's the same. Sophie hugged him, her small arms barely reaching around his waist. You're allowed to love someone else, Dad. Mom would want you to. Daniel held his daughter, feeling the weight of loss and the possibility of something new wrestling within him. When did you grow up so much? 3rd grade, Mrs. Henderson's class. We did a unit on emotional intelligence. Sophie pulled back with a grin. Also, I read your self-help books when you're at work. Those are supposed to be private. You hide them behind the cookbooks. That's not really hiding. The days before the competition passed quickly. Daniel started his new position at Blackwood Industries, reporting to Dr. Nakamura in the Practical Systems Division. The work utilized his decades of hands-on knowledge while exposing him to engineering principles he'd only intuited before. His colleagues treated him with respect that bordered on deference. Word had spread about the sterling inspection, about the 17 violations he'd documented, about the lives his persistence had protected. You're something of a legend around here, one young engineer told him. The maintenance guy who took down a corrupt developer and got Elena Blackwood personally involved. I didn't take down anyone. I just documented what I found. That's more than most people would have done. Sterling had connections everywhere. Going against him was career suicide. It was the right thing to do. The engineer shook his head with something like admiration. I hope I have that kind of courage someday. Daniel thought about his cramped apartment, his fired position, his uncertain future before Elena's intervention. Courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was acting anyway because people were depending on you. Elena maintained professional distance at the office, their interactions limited to brief greetings in hallways. But she texted him each evening, asking about Sophie's competition preparation, offering suggestions for her presentation. The night before the competition, Sophie couldn't sleep. Daniel found her at the dining table at midnight, running through her notes for the 100th time, her bridge model gleaming under the lamplight. Soph, you need rest. What if I forget my presentation? What if the judges ask questions I can't answer? What if the bridge fails? Daniel sat beside her, pulling her onto his lap like he'd done when she was small. Remember what Mom used to say before your piano recitals. Butterflies mean you care enough to be nervous. Just make sure they're flying in formation. Your butterflies are flying in formation, baby. Your bridge is solid. Your presentation is prepared. Everything you can control, you've controlled. What about everything I can't control? That's what faith is for. Daniel kissed the top of her head. Faith that you've done the work. Faith that whatever happens, you'll handle it. Faith that your dad and Miss Blackwood will be there cheering for you no matter what. Sophie was quiet for a moment. Dad, if I win the scholarship, does that mean things will be easier for us? Things are already easier, Soph. We have a safe place to live. I have a good job. You have opportunities you didn't have before. He turned her to face him. This competition isn't about making things easier. It's about you doing something amazing because you can. Because your brain works in ways that most people can't even imagine. Mom's brain worked that way too. That's right. And she'd be so proud of you right now. Sophie hugged him tightly. I wish she could see my bridge. She can, baby. Wherever she is, she can see it. And she's probably telling all the angels about her brilliant daughter who's going to change the world. Sophie laughed through tears. Angels don't care about engineering. Your mother would make them care. She was very persuasive. The morning of December 27th arrived crisp and clear. Daniel and Sophie reached the Museum of Science and Industry early, securing their assigned station and carefully setting up the bridge model that represented weeks of collaborative effort. Sophie arranged her presentation materials with shaking hands, her nervousness visible despite her preparation. Remember, Daniel said quietly, the judges are looking for innovation and understanding. You have both. Just be yourself and explain your design like you explained it to Miss Blackwood. Like I'm teaching instead of performing. Exactly. The best engineers are teachers. They make complex things understandable. The competition opened to the public at noon. Judges circulated among projects, while families and spectators explored the exhibits. Sophie handled the first round of questioning with growing confidence, her initial nervousness giving way to enthusiasm as she explained her tension distribution system. 2 o'clock passed, then 2:30. Daniel checked his phone repeatedly, watching the entrance, telling himself it didn't matter if Elena came. At 2:47 she appeared. Striding through the exhibition hall in her tailored suit, she drew attention from every direction. Parents whispered recognition. Judges did double takes. Sophie's face transformed with joy. You came? Elena's expression softened as she took in Sophie's professional display and confident posture. I said I would. The board meeting ran long, but some things are more important than corporate negotiations. Do you want to see how it works? I've added improvements based on your suggestions about the secondary supports. I'd love to see. Daniel watched them together, his daughter explaining her design to a billionaire CEO who listened with genuine attention, offering observations that respected Sophie's knowledge while gently expanding her understanding. Something shifted in his chest. Not quite recognition of what they'd become to each other, but awareness that whatever this was, it mattered more than he'd allowed himself to acknowledge. The final judging round began at 3:30. Each finalist received 5 minutes to present their project to the complete panel. Sophie's turn came third. Daniel held his breath as she stepped forward, her voice steady as she explained how her bridge distributed tension through multiple points rather than centralized support. The key innovation is redundancy, Sophie said, pointing to her model. Most bridges fail at single stress points. My design creates a web of interconnected supports. If one element weakens, the others compensate, like a family. The analogy made Daniel's throat tighten. Beside him, Elena's hand found his squeezing briefly before pulling away. The principle applies beyond engineering, Sophie continued. Any system, mechanical, social, personal, is stronger when the load is shared, when people work together instead of trying to carry everything alone. A judge leaned forward. That's a remarkably mature perspective for someone your age. Where did you learn to think about systems this way? Sophie glanced toward Daniel and Elena. From watching people I love figure out how to support each other. And from my mom, who taught me that strength isn't about being perfect. It's about building something that holds together even when parts of it hurt. The final demonstration exceeded all requirements. Sophie's bridge held weight that should have collapsed it, the tension distribution working exactly as designed. When she returned to their station, Daniel pulled her into a hug. "Soph, that was incredible. I meant what I said about families and load distribution." She looked between Daniel and Elena. "We're stronger together, all three of us." Elena's composure cracked. For a moment, she looked almost fragile. "Sophie, you don't have to say anything." Sophie took Elena's hand with the confidence of a child who sees truth clearly. Some things just are what they are. The award ceremony began an hour later. Third place went to a solar-powered water purification system. Second place went to an innovative approach to earthquake-resistant building design. And in second place, the head judge announced, for her innovative tension distribution, bridge design, Sophie Carter. Sophie's face lit with disbelief and joy as she stepped forward to receive her certificate and scholarship. Daniel clapped until his hands hurt. Beside him, Elena wiped at her eyes with uncharacteristic lack of composure. Sophie returned, clutching her certificate, looking from Daniel to Elena with shining eyes. "I did it. We did it." "You did it." Elena corrected, her voice thick. "Your innovation, your presentation, your achievement. But you helped, both of you." Sophie hugged them simultaneously, pulling Daniel and Elena into awkward proximity. This is what family feels like, even when it's complicated. Daniel caught Elena's eye over Sophie's head. Something passed between them, acknowledgement of what they'd become, recognition of what they might yet be. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For seeing her, for helping her, for—" he struggled to find words. "For being here." Elena's expression softened in a way he'd only seen glimpses of before. "There's nowhere else I'd rather be." Sophie pulled back, studying them with that knowing expression. "You're doing it again. The looking thing. The one that means you want to say something but you're both too scared." "Sophie," Daniel started. "It's okay. I'm patient. I can wait for grown-ups to figure things out." She held up her certificate. "Can we get ice cream? Champions deserve ice cream." They found an ice cream shop near the museum, the three of them sharing a booth, while Sophie recounted every detail of the judging, her excitement too large to contain. Elena listened with genuine attention, asking questions that kept Sophie talking, laughing at her observations about the other competitors. Daniel watched them both, his heart full of something he hadn't felt in 4 years. Hope. Real hope. Not the desperate kind that gets you through dark nights, but the settled kind that believes tomorrow might be better than today. His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Chen's rehabilitation facility. "Good news. Cleared for discharge next week. Ready to go home." Home. The apartment Elena had saved. The building Daniel's documentation had protected. The community that had survived because one maintenance worker refused to stay quiet. Daniel showed the message to Elena. "She's going home." Elena smiled. That was always the goal. No, the goal was stopping dangerous construction. Saving Mrs. Chen's apartment was extra credit. Extra credit is still worth earning. Sophie looked up from her ice cream. "Are you talking about Mrs. Chen? The nice lady from Dad's old building? She's going home, Soph. Back to her apartment." Sophie's face lit up. "Can we visit her? I want to show her my certificate." "I think she'd love that." Outside the ice cream shop, Chicago's winter darkness had fallen, but the cold didn't touch them. Sophie walked between Daniel and Elena, holding both their hands, swinging the way children do when they feel completely safe. "Best day ever," she declared. Daniel looked at Elena over his daughter's head. "I think she's right." "I think she usually is." Elena's voice carried warmth he'd never heard before. "About most things. Even the complicated things, especially the complicated things." Elena squeezed his hand briefly through Sophie's grip. Children see clearly what adults overcomplicate. Sophie tugged them both forward. "Stop being slow. We're celebrating." They walked through the winter evening, three people from different worlds finding common ground. Not because circumstance forced them together, but because they chose to build something new, like bridges, like family, like love, when it's finally ready to admit what it is. New Year's Eve arrived with the kind of quiet that follows storms. Daniel stood at the window of their Wellington Avenue apartment, watching fireworks explode over the Chicago skyline. Sophie had fallen asleep on the couch an hour before midnight, exhausted from a week of celebration and preparation for her upcoming summer engineering program. His phone buzzed with a text from Elena. "Happy New Year, Daniel. I hope this one brings you everything you deserve." He typed back, "Same to you. Sophie's asleep." The excitement finally caught up with her. She earned the rest. Her presentation at the competition was extraordinary. Daniel smiled at the screen. She had good teachers. A pause. Then, "I'm on my balcony watching the fireworks. Alone. It occurs to me that I've spent most New Year's Eves alone." The admission carried weight. Elena Blackwood didn't share vulnerability easily. "You could come here," Daniel typed before he could second-guess himself. "Sophie would love to wake up and find you made breakfast." Another pause, longer this time. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." 20 minutes later, Elena knocked softly on his door. She'd changed from whatever formal event she'd been attending into jeans and a sweater, clothes Daniel had never seen her wear. Without the armor of her business attire, she looked younger, more human, more uncertain. "I brought champagne," she said, holding up a bottle that probably cost more than his weekly grocery budget. It seemed appropriate. "Come in, and keep your voice down. Sophie's finally sleeping." They settled on the small balcony wrapped in blankets against the cold, watching the last of the fireworks fade into smoke and memory. "Thank you for inviting me," Elena said quietly. "I wasn't looking forward to another midnight alone." "Why were you alone? I'd think someone in your position would have endless party invitations." "I did. 17 to be exact. Galas, corporate events, society functions." She took a sip of champagne. None of them wanted Elena. They wanted Blackwood Industries' CEO. There's a difference. Daniel considered this. When's the last time someone wanted just Elena? She was quiet for a long moment. "I'm not sure anyone ever has. Even before Richard, my ex-fiancé, even then, I think he wanted what I could become more than who I was. That's a lonely way to live." "I didn't know any other way." Elena turned to face him, her expression open in a way he'd rarely seen. "Until you refused to give up your table." Daniel laughed softly. "I still can't believe I did that." "Neither could I. Do you know how many people have told me no in my adult life, actually told me no and meant it?" "I'm guessing not many." "You were the first in over a decade." Elena's voice carried wonder. "You looked at everything I represented, the money, the power, the influence, and you saw through it. You saw me, the person underneath all the armor. I saw someone who was used to getting her way and needed to be reminded that other people matter too." "That too," Elena smiled. "But you didn't back down when I pushed. You didn't crumble or apologize or defer. You just held your ground, with dignity. My wife used to say that dignity isn't something anyone can give you or take away. It's something you carry with you regardless of circumstances." She sounds like she was wise. She was. Daniel's voice softened. She was also stubborn, opinionated, and terrible at cooking. But wise, yes, especially about people. "Do you think she would have liked me?" The question surprised him. Elena Blackwood asking for approval from a dead woman she'd never met. "I think she would have seen through your walls even faster than I did. And I think she would have told you that money can't buy the things that actually matter." "What things?" "Connection, trust, someone who sees you at your worst and stays anyway." Daniel met her eyes. "Family." Elena's composure flickered. "I've never been good at family. Mine certainly wasn't good at being one." "That's not a permanent condition. Family isn't just biology. It's choice. It's showing up when things are hard. It's letting people in even when it's terrifying." Like you've let me in? Daniel considered the question carefully. Over the past weeks, Elena had become woven into the fabric of his daily life. Texts each evening. Visits that lasted longer than necessary. A presence at Sophie's triumph that meant more than he'd expected. Yes, he admitted. Like I've let you in. Elena set down her champagne glass, her hand trembling slightly. Daniel, I need to tell you something. Okay. When I drove through that blizzard to check on you, when I bought the building to protect Mrs. Chen, when I helped Sophie with her bridge design. She paused, gathering courage. I told myself it was practical. Efficient solutions to identifiable problems. That's how I've always operated. But that's not why I did those things. Elena's voice dropped. I did them because when I think about you and Sophie, I feel something I haven't felt in 15 years. Something I convinced myself I was incapable of feeling. Daniel's heart hammered against his ribs. What do you feel? Like I matter. Not my money or my connections or what I can provide. Me. Elena. Her eyes glistened in the dim light. You look at me like I'm a person, not a resource. Like I'm worth knowing even without the empire I built. No one has ever made me feel that way. Elena. I know it's complicated. I know we're from different worlds. I know there are 1,000 reasons why this doesn't make sense. She took a shaky breath. But Sophie said something at the competition. About families being stronger when the load is shared. About building things that hold together even when parts of them hurt. She's smarter than both of us combined. She is. Elena laughed through tears she wasn't bothering to hide. And she's right. I'm tired of carrying everything alone, Daniel. I'm tired of walls and armor and pretending I don't need anyone. I'm tired of being efficient instead of happy. Daniel reached for her hand. She let him take it. I've been alone for 4 years, he said quietly. After Jennifer died, I convinced myself that Sophie was enough. That focusing on her gave my life meaning, and I didn't need anything else. And now I realize I was protecting myself. Building my own walls, just different ones. He squeezed her fingers. You terrified me when I first met you. Not because of your money or your power, because of how you made me feel. How did I make you feel? Alive. Interested in something besides survival for the first time since Jennifer. Daniel's voice cracked slightly. And guilty because I thought wanting something for myself meant I wasn't fully committed to Sophie. Sophie wants you to be happy. She told me so. I know. She's been working on this since October, apparently. Reading my self-help books when I'm at work. Elena laughed, a genuine sound that transformed her features. She's remarkable. She gets it from her mother. Daniel paused. But she also gets her stubbornness from me. And her belief that people can change, that walls can come down. That bridges can be built between worlds that seem impossibly far apart. Is that what we're building? A bridge? I don't know what we're building, but I know I want to find out. Daniel lifted her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. If you're willing. Elena's answer was to lean forward and press her lips against his. The kiss was soft, questioning, uncertain, two people who had forgotten how to be vulnerable, learning the steps again. When they finally pulled apart, Elena's eyes were bright with tears and something that looked like hope. I'm willing, she whispered. I'm terrified, but I'm willing. That's all any of us can be. They stayed on the balcony until dawn, talking about everything and nothing. Elena shared stories from her early days building Blackwood Industries. The 18-hour workdays, the coding sessions that lasted through multiple nights, the moment she realized she'd created something extraordinary from betrayal and determination. Daniel told her about Jennifer. Not just her death, but her life. The way she laughed at his terrible jokes. How she could fix any mechanical problem but couldn't boil water without burning it. The way she'd held Sophie for the first time, tears streaming down her face, whispering promises about the life they would build together. She sounds wonderful, Elena said. She was. And losing her nearly destroyed me. Daniel's voice steadied. But she made me promise not to let grief become my whole story. She made me promise to find joy again for Sophie's sake and for my own. And have you found joy? Daniel looked at Elena, at this complicated, brilliant, terrified woman who had somehow become essential to his happiness. I'm working on it. Sophie found them asleep on the balcony the next morning, wrapped in blankets, Elena's head resting on Daniel's shoulder. She stood watching them for a long moment, a smile spreading across her face. Then she went to the kitchen and started making breakfast loudly enough to wake them, but quietly enough to give them a few more minutes of peace. When Daniel stumbled inside, Sophie was flipping pancakes with practiced efficiency. "Morning, Dad. Miss Blackwood. Coffee's almost ready." Elena followed her hair, disheveled, her composure nowhere to be found. "Sophie, I didn't mean to fall asleep on our balcony. It happens." Sophie's grin was innocent and knowing simultaneously. "I made extra pancakes." Daniel caught his daughter's eye, raising an eyebrow in question. "I told you," Sophie said matter-of-factly. "I'm patient. I can wait for grown-ups to figure things out. But I'm glad you finally did." Elena's laugh caught somewhere between embarrassment and relief. "You knew this would happen." "I hypothesized it would happen, based on available data and behavioral observation." Sophie slid pancakes onto plates. "Also, you both smile different when you're together. The real kind of smile. I've been tracking it since December." "Tracking it?" "I'm going to be an engineer. Data collection is important." Mrs. Chen came home on January 3rd. Daniel and Sophie helped her move back into her apartment, which had been modified with accessibility features she didn't remember ordering. A walk-in shower replaced the old tub. Grab bars lined the hallway. A medical alert system sat on her nightstand. "I don't understand," Mrs. Chen said, tears streaming down her weathered face. "The renovation costs. I couldn't afford." "A donor covered it," Daniel explained. "Someone who believes that people deserve to live in their homes with dignity." Mrs. Chen looked at him knowingly. "That Blackwood woman, the one you've been seeing." Daniel didn't bother denying it. "She wanted to help. She did more than help. She saved my home." Mrs. Chen took his hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "She's a good one, Daniel. I can tell. Don't let her go." "I don't intend to." Sophie presented Mrs. Chen with her competition certificate, explaining every detail of her bridge design with the enthusiasm only a 9-year-old could sustain. Mrs. Chen listened with genuine attention, asking questions that proved she was following along despite her age. "You'll change the world someday, Sophie Carter," Mrs. Chen declared. "Mark my words." "That's what Dad says. And Miss Blackwood. And now you." Sophie beamed. 3 people can't be wrong. Elena appeared at the apartment that evening with dinner from Mrs. Chen's favorite Chinese restaurant and flowers for her kitchen table. "Welcome home, Mrs. Chen." The elderly woman studied Elena with sharp eyes that had seen everything and forgotten nothing. "So you're the one who bought my building." Elena's composure flickered. "I acquired a controlling interest in the holding company that—" "You bought my building to save an old woman's home." Mrs. Chen cut through the corporate language with blunt efficiency. "Don't bother explaining the structure. I'm 89 years old. I know what matters and what doesn't." "What matters?" "That you did it. Not for profit or publicity. Just because it was the right thing." Mrs. Chen reached for Elena's hand. Daniel's wife, Jennifer, she would have approved. She always said character shows in actions, not words. Elena's eyes glistened. "I wish I could have met her." "She would have liked you. Underneath all that armor, you're soft, like Daniel. You both pretend to be tougher than you are." Mrs. Chen smiled. "Take care of each other. Life is too short and too hard to spend alone." January 15th arrived with Sophie's first session at the Blackwood Foundation STEM program. Daniel drove her to the facility, his new position at Blackwood Industries, allowing flexibility he'd never had before. Sophie bounced in the passenger seat, her excitement too large to contain. "Do you think the other kids will be nice?" "I think they'll be kids. Some nice, some not. Like everywhere." "What if I'm not smart enough? What if they all know things I don't?" "Then you'll learn new things. That's the whole point." Daniel squeezed her shoulder. "You earned your place here, Soph. Your bridge design. Your competition presentation. Your mind that sees solutions others miss. Nobody gave you this. You earned it." Miss Blackwood helped. Miss Blackwood recognized what was already there. There's a difference. Sophie was quiet for a moment. "Dad, is Miss Blackwood going to be around? Like for a long time?" Daniel chose his words carefully. "I hope so. Would that be okay with you?" "More than okay." Sophie's voice carried certainty. "I like who you are when she's around, and I like who she's becoming when we're around." "Who's she becoming?" "Someone who remembers how to play. Someone who doesn't hide behind walls anymore." Sophie grinned. "Someone who's almost as good at bridge engineering as me." The STEM facility was everything Daniel couldn't have provided on his own equipment, mentorship, resources, connections. But more importantly, it was filled with children like Sophie. Kids who saw the world differently, who asked questions others found strange, who built things because they couldn't help themselves. Sophie fit in immediately, her initial nervousness evaporating as she discovered kindred spirits, who understood her particular brand of passion. Watching her through the observation window, Daniel felt Jennifer's presence more strongly than he had in months. Not grief this time, gratitude. For the daughter they'd made together. For the life that continued despite loss. For the unexpected turns that had brought Elena into their world. His phone buzzed. "Elena. How is she?" "Perfect. She found her people." "I knew she would. Kids like Sophie recognize each other." "Thank you. For this. For everything." "You don't have to keep thanking me, Daniel." "I know. But I want you to know that I see what you're doing. Not just the money or the resources. The attention you pay to her. The way you listen. The way you treat her like she matters." A pause. Then, "She does matter. They both do. Both. Sophie matters, and you matter. To me." Elena's voice carried vulnerability she still wasn't comfortable showing. "I've never had people who mattered before. Not like this." "It's terrifying, isn't it?" "Completely terrifying. But also worth it. More than I ever imagined." The weeks that followed wove their lives together in ways none of them had planned. Elena learned to cook badly, but with enthusiasm that made Daniel laugh and Sophie offer patient instruction. Daniel learned to navigate the world. Elena inhabited board meetings, foundation events, the particular rhythms of power and influence that had once seemed impossibly foreign. Sophie learned that family could be chosen, as well as born, that bridges between different worlds were built through patience and trust, and the willingness to keep trying. February brought Valentine's Day, which Elena approached with characteristic over-preparation and underlying terror. "I've never actually celebrated Valentine's Day," she admitted the night before. "Not really. Richard always made it about expensive dinners and public appearances, never about actually connecting." "What do you want it to be about?" "I don't know. That's the problem." Elena's frustration was directed at herself. "I've mastered corporate negotiations, acquisition strategies, market dynamics, but this being in a relationship, building something real, I have no idea what I'm doing." "Neither do I." Daniel pulled her close. "Jennifer and I figured it out together day by day. We made mistakes, we learned, we tried again. What if I make mistakes with you? You will. I will too. That's how it works." He kissed her forehead. "The question isn't whether we'll mess up. It's whether we'll keep trying anyway." Valentine's Day turned out to be simple. Dinner at home, cooked together, while Sophie supervised with 9-year-old authority. A walk through the neighborhood holding hands, talking about everything and nothing. A movie on the couch with Sophie between them falling asleep before the credits rolled. "This is perfect," Elena whispered over Sophie's head. "It's ordinary." "Ordinary is perfect. I've had extraordinary my whole life." Elena's voice carried wonder. "I never knew ordinary could feel like this." March brought Sophie's spring break and a trip to visit Mrs. Chen at her apartment. The elderly woman was thriving. Her rehabilitation complete, her mobility restored, her spirit undiminished by her ordeal. She'd started a small garden on her balcony, growing herbs she used to flavor the meals she insisted on cooking for her visitors. "Sit, sit," she commanded when they arrived. "I made dumplings. Sophie helped me with the dough last week." Over lunch, Mrs. Chen watched Daniel and Elena with knowing eyes. "You figured it out," she observed. "How to be together." "We're learning," Daniel admitted. "That's all any of us do. Learn and adjust and keep trying." Mrs. Chen turned to Elena. "You're different than when I first heard about you. Softer, more human." Daniel and Sophie have been good influences. Don't give them all the credit. You chose to let them in. That was your courage, not theirs. Mrs. Chen's voice carried the wisdom of 9 decades. Building walls is easy. Anyone can hide. Choosing to be vulnerable, that takes real strength. Elena's hand found Daniel's under the table. "I'm learning that too." April arrived with Sophie's acceptance into Northwestern's summer engineering program, the scholarship she'd earned through her competition success. The letter came on a Tuesday, and Sophie read it 3 times before letting herself believe it was real. "Dad, Dad!" She burst into the kitchen where Daniel and Elena were making dinner together. "I got in full scholarship, everything paid." Daniel caught her as she launched herself into his arms, spinning her around while she shrieked with joy. "I knew you would," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I knew it." Elena joined the embrace, the 3 of them holding each other in the small kitchen, laughing and crying and celebrating together. "Your mom would be so proud," Daniel whispered into Sophie's hair. "I know." Sophie pulled back, her face streaming with tears. "I feel her sometimes. When I'm working on designs or solving problems, like she's watching." She is, I'm sure of it. That night, after Sophie had finally gone to sleep, Daniel and Elena sat on the balcony where their relationship had truly begun. 6 months, Elena said quietly. "It's been 6 months since you refused to give up your table." "Has it only been 6 months?" Daniel shook his head. "It feels like longer. Like you've always been here. I didn't know my life was missing something until you showed me what I was lacking." Elena leaned into his shoulder. "Connection. Authenticity. Someone who sees through the armor. You've changed too, you know." "How?" "You laugh now. Real laughs, not the polished ones you use in meetings. You cook terrible dinners and don't apologize for them. You let Sophie win at cards, even though you're counting them in your head." Daniel kissed her temple. "You've become someone I didn't expect. Someone I love." Elena went still. "You love me. Is that surprising? No one has ever—" She paused, gathering herself. "Richard said he loved me, but he loved what I could become. My parents said they loved me, but they loved my achievements. No one has ever loved me. Just me. I love you, Elena. The woman who drove through a blizzard because she was worried about us. The woman who bought a building to save an elderly woman's home. The woman who helps my daughter with her engineering designs and lets her teach you how to make pancakes." Daniel turned to face her. "I love all of it. Even the complicated parts. Especially the complicated parts." Elena's tears fell freely now, a vulnerability she'd never have shown 6 months ago. "I love you too. I've been terrified to say it. Terrified that saying it makes it real, and real things can be lost. Real things can also be kept." Daniel wiped her tears with gentle fingers. I lost Jennifer. It nearly destroyed me. But Sophie made me keep going, made me believe that love was worth the risk of loss. And now I believe it more than ever, because of you, because of what we're building together. Elena kissed him then with all the passion and vulnerability and hope she'd been protecting for 15 years. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were crying. We should probably go inside, Daniel said. It's cold. Not yet. Elena nestled closer. I want to remember this moment, this feeling. What feeling? Home. Her voice broke on the word. For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm home. The summer program exceeded all expectations. Sophie thrived among peers who understood her mentors, who challenged her resources, that expanded her imagination. She came home each evening bubbling with new ideas, new projects, new dreams. Elena attended her final presentation in August, watching with pride, as Sophie explained a design for flood-resistant infrastructure that had impressed even the college-level instructors. She's extraordinary, Elena whispered to Daniel. She always was. Now she has people who can help her become everything she's capable of. Because of you. Because of us. Daniel squeezed her hand. Because we built something together. September brought new beginnings. Sophie started 5th grade with confidence Daniel had never seen before. Mrs. Chen celebrated her 90th birthday with a party that filled her apartment with neighbors and friends, a community that had nearly been scattered by Sterling's greed, but had instead grown stronger through crisis. Daniel received a promotion at Blackwood Industries, his practical knowledge now valued rather than overlooked, his insights, shaping projects that would affect thousands of lives. And Elena, for the first time in her memory, took a vacation. 3 days at a cabin in Wisconsin with Daniel and Sophie. No phones, no emails, no corporate emergencies. Just hiking and fishing and card games and the kind of ordinary joy she'd never known she was missing. On their last night, Sophie fell asleep early, exhausted from a day of exploring. Daniel and Elena sat on the cabin's porch watching stars emerge over the lake. I have something to tell you, Elena said. Good or bad? Good. I hope. She took a deep breath. I've started the process of restructuring my company, delegating more authority, creating systems that don't require me to be available every moment of every day. Why? Because I want more of this. Ordinary evenings, quiet mornings, time with you and Sophie that isn't stolen between meetings. Elena's voice carried certainty she'd rarely shown about personal matters. I built an empire because I thought it would make me safe. Turns out safety was never what I needed. What do you need? A connection, family, love. She turned to face him. You. Daniel pulled her close, feeling her heart beat against his chest. You have me. You've had me for a while now. I know. Elena smiled against his shoulder. Sophie told me back in March. She said you'd been emotionally committed since February, but were too stubborn to articulate it clearly. Her words. Daniel laughed. That girl sees everything. She does. She also told me I should stop being a chicken and tell you how I feel. Elena lifted her head. So I'm telling you, I love you, Daniel Carter. I love your daughter. I love the life we're building together. I love you too, Elena Blackwood. Walls and all. The walls are coming down. I've noticed. He kissed her softly. And I'll be here for every brick. The anniversary of Jennifer's death came in October. Daniel and Sophie visited her grave, bringing flowers and stories and a small model bridge Sophie had built specifically for this purpose. It distributes tension through multiple points, Sophie explained, placing it carefully against the headstone. So even when parts of it hurt, the whole thing stays strong. Like our family. Daniel knelt beside his daughter, his throat tight. She would be so proud of you, Soph. I know. Sophie leaned into his side. I feel her sometimes, when I'm happy. Like she's happy too. I think she is. Dad? Sophie's voice was small. Is it okay that I love Miss Blackwood? I don't want Mom to think I forgot about her. Baby loving Elena doesn't mean forgetting your mom. Hearts expand. They don't replace one love with another, they grow big enough to hold both. Mom would like Elena, wouldn't she? I think she'd be grateful that someone was taking care of us, that we found joy again, like she made me promise. Daniel hugged his daughter close. And I think she'd be proud of the bridge you're building, between her memory and our future. Sophie placed her hand on the headstone, a gesture she'd developed over years of visits. I love you, Mom. Dad loves you too. We're happy now. I hope you're happy too. The autumn wind rustled through the cemetery, carrying the scent of falling leaves and approaching winter. And Daniel Carter, standing beside his daughter, with love for two women filling his heart, finally understood what Jennifer had been trying to tell him all along. Grief and joy weren't opposites. They were partners. Loss and love weren't enemies. They were two sides of the same extraordinary experience of being human. He had built walls after Jennifer died, just as Elena had built walls after her betrayals. They had both believed isolation was protection, that keeping people out was safer than letting them in. They had both been wrong. Because bridges were stronger than walls, connection was more valuable than protection. And love, real love, was worth every risk it demanded. Sophie took his hand as they walked back to the car, where Elena waited with hot chocolate and quiet understanding. Ready to go home? Elena asked. Daniel looked at his daughter, at this remarkable woman who had somehow become essential to their happiness, at the family they had built together from loss and hope and the stubborn refusal to give up. Yeah, he said, climbing into the car. We're ready. Elena drove them home through streets golden with autumn light. Sophie fell asleep in the back seat, her hand still holding the flower she'd saved from her mother's grave. And Daniel sat beside the woman he loved, watching the world pass by, feeling Jennifer's blessing in every breath. Some bridges take years to build, some take lifetimes, but the ones that matter, the ones that connect hearts across impossible distances, those bridges are worth every struggle, every doubt, every moment of terrified hope. Daniel Carter had refused to give up his table in a fancy restaurant. That single act of dignity had changed everything, not because it was grand or heroic, but because it was true, and sometimes truth is all the bridge you need.